Hi students, today we will be studying about the animal classification. Now if you see the entire living organism around us, okay, they mainly consist of either plants or they mainly consist of the animals. Now today we will be studying about the animal part because I guess you have already studied about your plants in the previous classes. Now, if I'm talking about animals, अपने चारों तरफ देखो, right? So if you will see that कुछ पशु ऐसे होते हैं कि जो जमीन पे क्रॉल करते हैं, but then there are many birds जो आसमान में उड़ते हैं. So there is a wide variety of animal, and this animal is almost about 7 billion on earth. Now, in order for this to make it easier that इतने सारे जो पशु पक्षी है अपने planet Earth में, in order to make it easy, because हम लोग ऐसे एक एक पक्षी को एक एक जानवर को ऐसे study नहीं कर सकते, so we need a proper classification for that, right? So this is all about our today's chapter, which is about animal classification. We'll be studying about in this chapter about the history of animal classification. Then you will be seeing that what are the criteria for animal classification, and finally you will be studying the entire animal classification. Okay, so we will start now with the history of animal classification. So now we will be starting the topic with about the animal classification. Now if I'm talking about this particular word, which is the classification, okay, it basically means that formation of small groups and subgroups, means छोटे-छोटे group and subgroups हम लोग बनाते हैं on the basis of the similarities and dissimilarities among the animals. And on this basis, the classification is formed. Now, if you are telling me that why this classification is done, it makes the study of the animals much more easier. इतने सारे जानवर and पशु पक्षी है हमारे around, so in that case, it makes it much more easier to study them more accurately if we do a proper classification to that. Also, the way the animals have evolved, right, from very primitive form to now an evolved form, ये जो पूरा जो evolution है, that becomes, the study becomes much more easier because of this classification. Now we will be saying that ये जो classification है, that it can be divided into two types. The most primitive form which was done is known as the artificial classification. Now, this artificial classification was first formulated by a Greek philosopher who was known as Aristotle. Okay, he was a Greek philosopher, and what he did is that whatever these animals were there on the basis of the physical characteristics means जो बाहर से वो लोग जो जैसे दिखते हैं, okay, like you know their body types, okay, then वो लोग कहाँ पे रहते हैं, what are the habits and habitats, okay, on these physical characteristics he classified these animals. Okay, so this artificial classification is mainly based on the physical characteristic. Whereas later on, another type of classification was formulated, which is known as the natural system of classification. Now, this natural system of classification which was there, you can understand that basically this one is based on the morphological features, right? जो बाहर से जैसे वो animal दिखता है on that basis. But this one, ये जो है, it was mainly dependent on the cellular level, means at the chromosome level, means बहुत नीचे का जो level है, that is the cellular level. This is mainly on the outside. ये जो है, this is more on a cellular level. Then you must have heard about the term chromosome, right? These chromosome, then उसका अगर कुछ biochemical properties है, तो on that basis this natural system of classification was formulated, and the first person, जो पहला इंसान who formulated this is known as the Bentham and Hooker. These are two scientists, okay. So in this case, it was Aristotle who first formulated it. Later on, in this case, artificial system of classification, there's another person who's known as Linnaeus. He also incorporated his idea. And later on, natural system of classification jab aaya, it was first formulated by Bentham and Hooker. So in this case, it is physiological and morphological characteristics. Here, it is mainly at the cellular level. Now, if you see around yourself, you will find many types of animals in and around us. By seeing them only, you can classify in a traditional way. Okay, traditional means पुराने way में जैसे वो लोग classification करते थे. On that basis, that is known as the traditional method of classification. So in that classification, the entire animal kingdom is either divided into non-chordates or it can be divided into chordates. Okay. Now, if I want to make it more simpler, ये जो chordates होते हैं, ये जो non-chordates होते हैं, they don't have a particular notochord. Okay, so this term is very, very important, which is known as the notochord. So in this case, the notochord is absent, but ये जो chordates है, इसमें notochord is present. This is the most important characteristics by which these animals are divided on this on the basis of this presence or absence of notochord. Apart from that, ये जो animals होते हैं, that is the notochords, इन लोग में there is a particular structure which is known as the pharyngeal gill slits. In this case also, they do not have the pharyngeal gill slits, and in this case, they again have the pharyngeal gill slits. So this is a very primitive way by which we can classify animals on the basis of the absence or presence of the notochord. So now that we have studied about animal classification, we will now see a very conventional method of classification of animal. Okay, there has been many scientists who has given many classification of animals, but this one is the most conventional method of animal classification. Now, when I'm talking about this conventional method of animal classification, it is divided the entire animal kingdom. Okay, the entire animal kingdom is divided into, that is your kingdom Animalia, is divided into two subkingdoms. Okay, the first subkingdom which is there, that is known as your non-chordata. In the previous time we have seen that non-chordata basically means where there is an absence of the notochord. So this one belongs to the subkingdom non-chordata. Another subkingdom which is there is your chordata. Now, furthermore, ये जो non-chordata है, this can be further grouped into further subphylums. Okay, so these phylums are, first of all, the phylums belong. The first phylum which is there, it is your protozoa. Okay, now let me tell you one thing about this phylum which is protozoa. It is not exactly animal kingdom में ये belong नहीं करता है. The new classification which is there, okay, ये जो protozoa है, इन लोग ने they have made an entirely new kingdom which is known as the protista. Okay, protistema, you must have heard about algae, right? So ये जो protozoa है, algae and then fungi, वो सब उस kingdom में डाल दिया है. But still, in the conventional method of animal classification, we will put the phylum protozoa. The next phylum which is there is your porifera. Okay, for example, ये porifera में you must have heard about this cycon or the bath sponge, right? So these belong to this phylum porifera. Now the next phylum which is there is your Cnidaria. आप लोग जब whenever you go to any aquarium, right? So वो aquarium में or any place where animals are kept, so you must have seen the jellyfish, right? So those jellyfish, then you must have heard about sea anemones. So those belong to this phylum Cnidaria. Next comes your Platyhelminthes. Now Platyhelminthes is basically flatworms. The next which is there is your Aschelminthes. Okay, now the next phylum which is there, this is very important for your examinations also, is your annelids or Annelida. Now Annelida, आप लोग ने, you must have seen the earthworm, right? So it is basically segmented. So the annelids are also known as the segmented worms. Let me tell you one thing, this Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes and this annelids are also belong to the worm category. Next which is there, which you see mostly in and around yourself, right? Like the butterfly, then the mosquitoes, then all the insects in and around you, okay, that belongs to the phylum which is known as the Arthropoda. Then comes your snail, right? The snail belongs to the phylum which is known as the Mollusca. Then you must have seen where आप लोग जब कोई sea beach में जाते हो, like Andaman and all those places, you must have seen starfish, right? The one which is radially symmetrical. So that belongs to the next phylum which is known as the Echinodermata. And finally comes the last phylum under this non-chordata is your Hemichordata. The name itself, when you see it, you can understand that Hemichordata is basically a transition between the non-chordates and the chordates. It will be having characteristics which belongs to the non-chordate also and to the chordates also. So these are your different phylums which is there under your subkingdom, that is non-chordata. Now let's come to this side which is the subkingdom chordata. Now when I'm talking about the subkingdom chordata, it has one phylum which is known as the phylum chordata. It's the same thing. So after this it is divided into subphylums. Okay, these subphylums, there are a total of 3 subphylums under this. Okay, the first one which is there is your Urochordata. The next subphylum which is there is your Cephalochordata. And finally, the last chordata, like we belong to this subphylum which is there, that is known as the vertebrates. The The phylum name is vertebrata. Another name for this vertebrata is your craniata. All the animals which you see more or less around yourself, like us, like dogs, like rabbits or like birds, जितने भी है सारे ये vertebrata subphylum में belong करते हैं. So this subphylum which is there, that is your vertebrata, this is further subdivided into the following classes. Okay. Now the first class which is there is known as your cyclostomata. Very primitive kind of vertebrata which have a notochord but very primitive. उन लोग का जो tail portion होता है ना उसमें ये notochord रहता है. Okay, so the next one which is the Pisces. Obviously आप लोग सब fishes खाते हो, right? So that belongs to this Pisces class. Then comes your amphibia. If I am talking about in and around you, the most common amphibia are the frogs, okay, जो आप लोग मेंढक बोलते हो. Then comes your the next class which is your reptilia. Okay, obviously घर पे तो lizards देखते ही हो आप लोग. So and even the snakes which is also there, that belongs to this reptilia. Then comes your the next one which is known as the aves. Okay, जितने भी सारे पक्षी है, they belong to this class which is known as aves. And finally us, हम लोग जो है, though we belong to the class which is known as the Mammalia. Okay, so this is divided, the subkingdom is divided into a phylum Chordata which is further divided into the subphylum, and the subphylum Vertebrata is further divided into these classes. Okay, so this is all about your conventional method of animal classification, जहाँ पे हम लोग ने इसको दो सब किंगडम में डिवाइड किया है on the basis of the most important thing, presence or absence of the notochord, जो हम लोग ने पहले ही डिस्कशन की है about this. अभी जो हम लोग पढ़ने जा रहे हैं वो है द वेरियस क्राइटेरियाज फॉर न्यू सिस्टम ऑफ क्लासिफिकेशन. ये जो क्राइटेरियाज है ये अकॉर्डिंग टू द न्यू सिस्टम आर 5 टाइप्स. देयर कैन बी मोर बट एज ऑफ नाउ इन योर पोर्शन यू हैव ओनली 5 टाइप्स, जो है ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, फिर उसके बाद है बॉडी सिमेट्री, फिर हम लोग का नेक्स्ट क्राइटेरिया है जर्म लेयर्स, उसके बाद है बॉडी कैविटी एंड द लास्ट इज बॉडी सेगमेंटेशन. अभी हम लोग एक एक करके ये जो क्राइटेरियाज है इसका हम लोग अभी स्टडी करेंगे. द फर्स्ट वन इज द ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. अभी हम लोग सब जानते हैं हम लोग का जो पूरा बॉडी है, ओके, दैट इज मेड अप ऑफ वेरी स्मॉलेस्ट यूनिट विच इज नोन एज द सेल, राइट? यू ऑल हैव हर्ड अबाउट सेल, दैट इट इज द स्ट्रक्चरल एंड फंक्शनल यूनिट ऑफ द लाइफ, राइट? सो दिस सेल, ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द सेल जो है हम लोग एनिमल्स को 2 क्राइटेरिया में डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. Okay, so what are the 2 groups on the basis of which we can divide on the number of cells? One is the unicellular animals. Okay, जितने भी आप लोग बैक्टीरिया देखते हो, फिर अमीबा देखते हो, they are unicellular, right? And जो हम लोग हैं, those are known as the multicellular. अभी ये जो यूनिसेल्यूलर है इसका जो ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है ये सिर्फ एक ही ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, ओके, एंड दैट ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज नोन एज द प्रोटोप्लाज्मिक ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. Now protoplasmic grade of organization means that the protoplasmic grade means that the cell which is there, it is only made up of one cell. So वो जो cell है it will carry out all the functions of the body of the bacteria. Okay, now when I'm talking about this protoplasmic, you will generally find it in the protozoan group. Okay, like for example जो amoeba होती है उन लोग में ये protoplasmic grade of organization रहती है. ओके नाउ हम लोग का जो मल्टी सेल्यूलर एनिमल्स होते हैं, इन लोग में टोटल 4 ग्रेड्स रहती है. ओके सो व्हाट आर द ग्रेड्स फॉर द मल्टी सेल्यूलर? द फर्स्ट वन विच इज देयर, ओके, दैट इज नोन एज द सेल्यूलर ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. ओके नाउ जो ये सेल्यूलर ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होते हैं, इसमें क्या होता है, इट हैज अ एग्रीगेट ऑफ सेल्स. ओके सो ये एग्रीगेट ऑफ सेल्स हैव नॉट फॉर्म्ड अ टिश्यू एज ऑफ नाउ. दिस एंटायर सेल्स कैरी आउट ऑल द फंक्शंस. यहाँ पे क्या देख रहे थे हम लोग, सिर्फ एक सेल है, यहाँ पे भी सेल्स ही है, टिश्यू नहीं हुआ है, बट देन यहाँ पे बहुत सारे सेल्स है और यहाँ पे एक सेल है. दिस इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द प्रोटोप्लाज्मिक एंड द सेल्यूलर ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. यहाँ पे भी एक सेल ही सारे फंक्शंस करते हैं, यहाँ पे बहुत सारे सेल्स जो है द कैरीज आउट द फंक्शंस. ओके द नेक्स्ट वन विच इज देयर इज योर cell tissue grade. Obviously from the name itself you have understood that ये जो cell tissue grade है, that means the cell have combined, okay, all the cells जो भी है वो उसने join किया है and it forms a tissue, and this tissue carries out the function which is there for your body. Okay now यहाँ पे जो cellular grade है, we can give an example of, for example, porifera. और ये जो सेल एंड टिश्यू ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, ये हम लोग देखते हैं द फाइलम विच इज नोन एज द निडेरिया. ओके अभी जो नेक्स्ट ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है अंडर दिस मल्टीसेल्यूलर इज योर टिश्यू एंड ऑर्गन सिस्टम ऑफ ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. ओके नाउ यहाँ पे क्या होता है, देयर आर मेनी टिश्यूज विच फॉर्म्स अ पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गन. ओके लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल बहुत सारे टिश्यूज लीड्स टू द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ द रिप्रोडक्टिव ऑर्गन्स. ओके और बहुत सारे टिश्यूज विच लीड्स टू द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ द रेस्पिरेटरी ऑर्गन्स. सो ये जो है हम लोग देखते हैं इन द फाइलम विच इज नोन एज द फ्लैटवर्म्स. अगर आप लोग को याद है, द फ्लैटवर्म्स आर बेसिकली द वंस विच इज ऑल्सो नोन एज द प्लैटीहेलमिंथस. ओके एंड जो लास्ट लेवल ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होता है, ग्रेड ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, जो हम लोग में होते हैं, ह्यूमंस में होते हैं, फिर फ्रॉग्स में होते हैं, फिर बर्ड्स में होता है. सो इन दैट केस दैट इज नोन एज द organ and organ system grade. Okay so इसमें क्या होता है, for example if I'm talking about the circulatory system, right? So in case of circulatory system, it is an organ system which is made up of the organs which is known as the heart, right? Next हम लोग बोल सकते हैं हम लोग का जो respiratory system होता है, so उसमें भी the respiratory system is the organ system, and जो organ involve होता है वो है lungs. So this is mainly seen in case of the higher group of animals जो हम लोग बोलते हैं, for एग्जाम्पल ह्यूमंस, फिर फ्रॉग्स, फिर बर्ड्स. ओके जो नेक्स्ट क्राइटेरिया ऑफ बॉडी सिमेट्री है, सो दिस इज हाउ वी हैव स्टडीड द फर्स्ट लेवल और फर्स्ट क्राइटेरिया ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन विच इज द ग्रेड्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. ना अगर नेक्स्ट हम लोग देखते हैं फॉर एग्जाम्पल द बॉडी सिमेट्री. द बॉडी सिमेट्री के बेसिस के ऊपर हम लोग जो एंटायर एनिमल्स है, whether it is the unicellular animal, whether it is the multicellular animals, we can divide it into 3 types. Okay, the first one is known as the asymmetrical body. I'll be drawing here an amoeba for your this thing better info knowledge. So if I'm talking about an amoeba, you see it is an irregular structure. हम लोग अगर इसको कोई भी planes में काटे, okay, where whatever plane it is there, we will not get any equal halves. Okay, so whichever imaginary axis we pass in the plane of the body, we will not get any halves. Okay, that is known as an asymmetrical body. The next one which is there, which you will find in the, remember we were discussing about the starfish, वो जो starfish होता है उसमें हम लोग the next होता है वो है radial symmetry. अभी जो ये रेडियल सिमेट्री है, बॉडी को कोई भी प्लेन से हम लोग अगर काटते हैं, ओके, वी विल गेट एन इक्वल हाफ. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल हम लोग अगर एक स्टारफिश लेते हैं, इसको हम लोग कोई भी एंगल से, कोई भी प्लेन से अगर काटते हैं, वी आर गोइंग टू गेट एन इक्वल हाफ ऑन बोथ द साइड्स. ओके, एंड द लास्ट विच इज देयर इज द bilateral symmetry. Now ये जो bilateral symmetry है, this is basically as अगर हम लोग को ये प्लेन में एक इमेजिनरी एक्सिस में हम लोग को अगर काटते हैं, तो देन इन दैट केस वी विल गेट एन इक्वल हाफ. और जो लास्ट है हम लोग का वो है बायलैटरल सिमेट्री. जो ये बायलैटरल सिमेट्री है, द बॉडी कैन बी कट इन ओनली वन इमेजिनरी एक्सिस. ओके, एंड इन वन प्लेन ओनली, देन ओनली इट इज गोइंग टू गिव टू इक्वल हाफ्स. अगर हम लोग का बॉडी जो है, इफ आई कट थ्रू दिस प्लेन, देन ओनली इट इज गोइंग टू गिव टू इक्वल halves. अगर मैं कोई भी प्लेन, ये प्लेन छोड़ के काटूं, तो देन इन दैट केस इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू गिव टू इक्वल हाफ्स. सो यहाँ पे क्या है, रेडियल सिमेट्री जो है, यहाँ पे हम लोग कोई भी प्लेन्स में अगर काटते हैं, देन द बॉडी इज गोइंग टू गिव इक्वल हाफ्स. ये जो एसिमेट्रिकल बॉडी है, इसका कोई भी प्लेन से अगर बॉडी को काटते हैं और इफ वी कट इट, देन वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू गेट एनी हाफ्स. बट द लास्ट वन विच इज देयर, दैट इज योर बायलैटरल सिमेट्री. इफ वी कट द बॉडी इन only one single plane, then only we are going to get two equal halves. So we have finished two criteria, that is your grade of organization and your body symmetry. The next criteria which we will be studying is your germ layers. Now these germ layers, okay, now these germ layers which is there, these are basically formed of primary layers of cells during embryogenesis. तो जितने भी animals है, on the basis of the germ layers can be divided into two types. Either it can be a diploblastic animal, okay, or it can be a triploblastic animal. Now, ये जो diploblastic animals, the animals which are diploblastic, they basically have only two germ layers. What are the two germ layers? They are the ectoderm and the endoderm. If I am talking about their TS of their entire germ layers, how do they look like? This is how it looks like. सबसे जो बाहर का लेयर होता है, इसको हम लोग बोलते हैं एक्टोडर्म. ओके, एंड देन द मिडिल लेयर विच इज देयर, दिस वन, दिस इज अ डेड लेयर which does not consists of any cells. And then finally जो inner layer is there, this is known as the endoderm. Okay, now generally the animals which is diploblastic, one of the very good examples of a diploblastic animals is Cnidaria. Okay, now when I'm talking about the triploblastic animals, the triploblastic animal consists of total of 3 germ layers. So what are these 3 germ layers? The 3 germ layers are, apart from the ectoderm and the endoderm, they also have a third layer which is known as the mesoderm, and they also have the ectoderm and the endoderm. Now if I am talking about again a cross section, if I draw a cross section of this triploblastic animals, the most outermost layer, the that is this one. This is your ectoderm. Okay. Then comes your middle layer, which is known as the mesoderm, and then finally which is your inner layer, this is known as your endoderm. Okay, so basically all those animals who are bilaterally symmetrical, they are triploblastic, and all those animals like for example जो starfish होते हैं, they are basically the diploblastic animals. Okay, now the next, so we have studied about the germ layers. Now the next criteria which is there is your body cavity. Okay, now when I'm talking about body cavity is basically the space or the cavity which is present in between the body and the internal organs. Okay, and that is filled up with a substance which is known as the coelom. So the body cavity is also known as the coelom. So all the animals, जितने भी सारे animals होते हैं, इन लोग को हम लोग 3 ग्रुप में डिवाइड कर सकते हैं on the basis of this coelom. Okay, for example, जो first group है, if there is no coelom only, अगर उसमें कोई body cavity होता ही नहीं है, that is no body cavity, then they are known as the acoelomate. Okay, for example, the animals which belong to this are porifera. Then your next one which is हम लोग जो flatworms बोलते हैं, that is your platyhelminthes. All these belongs to your acoelomate. The next criteria or the next group of organs, the next group of animals, they belong to a category which is known as the pseudocoelomate. तो ये pseudocoelomate में क्या होता है? They have the body cavity which is the coelom, so they have the body cavity. But the fact that the body cavity is actually formed not from the mesoderm but from the blastocele. So the body cavity is mainly formed from the blastocele. So that means it is not actual coelom, right? So इसलिए हम लोग ने इसको एक different category में डाल दिया है, which is known as the pseudocoelomate. Okay, so this pseudocoelomate which is there, a very good example of them are the Aschelminthes. And the last which is us, okay, that they belong to the last group of organisms which is known as the eucoelomate. तो eucoelomate में क्या होता है? They have the actual coelom or the actual body cavity, and this body cavity is formed from the mesoderm. Okay, that's why they are known as the eucoelomate. So all the organisms other than the porifera, then platyhelminthes, nidaria and aschelminthes, ये सारे phylum को छोड़ के जितने भी सारे phylums है, they belong to this category which is known as the eucoelomate. It is also known as the coelomate also. Okay, so any phylum which is beyond this, like for example we can put arthropoda in this. Okay, so this are the, on the basis of this criteria which is the body cavity. Okay, that is your body cavity. On the basis of that, we can divide it into 3 types. One is known as the acoelomate, then comes your pseudocoelomate, and finally comes your eucoelomate. And the last criteria for this new system of classification जो है, it is the body segmentation. So body segmentation में देखा गया है, there are many animals जिसका body जो है उसको हम लोग छोटे-छोटे units में divide कर सकते हैं, okay? And those units are known as the segments. In this case, the body segmentation is found mainly very much observant in one of the phylum which is known as the phylum annelids. That is your phylum Annelida. So these are the various criteria on the basis of which the classification of animals can be done. That is, a new system of classification is based on these 5 criteria. Now we will be studying about